So hi, everybody. I'm going to remind XCAPers that if you can remain muted, that would be awesome. And that you can use the raise hand feature to let me know at any point if you'd like to speak. And we have help today from Philip, Kamhi, and Sarah Wilson, who shows up as Office of Transportation, and Nate Baird, and Ruchika is playing the role that Sylvia Starlack played last week to help us out, to help run this meeting. So we appreciate everybody's help. It takes, as Larry said, a cast of thousands to get this done. So we're thankful for their help. And so I will let Sarah, you're going to call the roll, I think it was? Yep. Great, awesome.
Okay. Hold on just a moment, sorry. Okay, Gregory Braille.
He's here, he's waving.
Phil Burton.
Waving.
Tony Carrasco.
Don't see Tony yet.
In-Yong Cho.
She's here, waving.
Megan Kahn.
Here. Megan's here.
Larry Klein.
Larry's here.
Patricia Lau.
She's excused.
Okay. Adina Levin.
She's not on.
Okay. Nadia Nayak. Here. Keith Reckdahl.
Here.
Dave Shen.
Here.
Carrie Templeton.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. So the first item on our agenda is actually going to be oral communications. And so I think, Sarah, you had a little something that you'll read out for the public to remember what to do for public comment. Everyone will get 2 minutes. And because of the quirkiness of Zoom, we cannot see the attendees who speak, but we can hear them, and everyone else will see the timer to see exactly how much time they have. And as a reminder, folks can send us a public comment via email as well. So if you wanted to speak to something, we could look at those things. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that. Sarah, was there anything you wanted to add?
Well, right, and it's Ruchika who will be handling the attendees' public comments, and so she's got the little intro.
Sorry, Ruchika, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Chair Nayak. We are an agenda item, oral communications. So if any members of the public wishing to speak during the oral communications, please digitally raise your hand or press *9 if you're dialing by the phone. Okay, sounds like we have one member of the public who would like to speak. Mr. David Kennedy, you have 2 minutes. You are allowed, please unmute yourself and you can begin talking now. Mr. David Kennedy, if you can hear us, you can unmute yourself now and you can begin talking.
This is David Kennedy. I have several observations and a request. Regarding the closing of Churchill, we hear about this quite a bit. And I'd like to remind everybody that in the 2030 Comprehensive Plan in Chapter 3 of the Transportation section, states that the city is committed to pursuing grade separations for pedestrians, bikes, and automobiles. More specifically, Policy T 3.13 requests that they preserve east-west connections to bind the city together. And Policy T 3.16 states that it should keep all existing railroad crossings open. Then moving on to the Churchill partial underpass was discussed at the last meeting, a very creative and innovative solution. Although there were several comments, acknowledgements that as it was refined, the pedestrian bicycle undercrossing was moved to Churchill. And it was comments were that that was somewhat awkward, not particularly bike or pedestrian friendly, and not very intuitive. The irony in this to me is that there was not that, I didn't hear that concern expressed for any of the crossings regarding automobiles and other motor vehicles. Lastly, we're running into a number of constraints on the various alternatives being considered. And I request, I even plead that the committee go back and reopen consideration of hybrid alternatives at all crossings, including even if this requires some property acquisitions. This probably would require going back to the city council to move forward on this, but I would say that future generations would be very thankful to you and the council. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't see any other members of the public who would like to speak at this time during oral communication. Oh, I'm sorry. I do see one more hand that's just been raised.
Okay.
Mr. Brian, you have 2 minutes. Please feel free to unmute yourself and begin to speak now.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to look into this. I appreciate it. I did send an email to the meeting last week. I'm really excited about the alternative underpasses that have been proposed. I encourage you to consider those, especially in that when ice rail came to Palo Alto, that idea, the elevated viaducts were rejected. Then the Citizens Advisory Committee that formed a couple of years later, they're kind of reject those things, and I don't think they're actually popular now. And so I'm really excited about the alternative plan. So I thank you for taking the time to look into them, and look forward to hearing what you have to say. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have anybody else for public comment? Now would be the time to raise your hand. This is for an item that is not on the agenda.
I don't see any other.
I see one more.
Oh, one more. Yes.
Susan Newman.
Ms. Susan Newman, please unmute yourself and you may begin to talk.
Thank you. Hi. I kind of have a question. I was trying to see what was on the agenda and can't find the page on the website anymore suddenly. And since I've got the floor, I guess I'll just add that I found last week's discussion of the partial underpass to be, very discouraging and disappointing. People are really looking for an alternative to closing Churchill, and the partial underpass seems to be a kind of compromise that offers a lot of benefits. I think some of the other ideas could work too, but I really hope that we will find the energy and will as a city to push forward to understand refinements on this particular alternative. I think there are some still to be had, and to really find something that will work and will avoid closing Churchill. Closing Churchill is just a really, really bad idea. And the majority of the neighbors in Southgate, who are really not represented by anyone on the council, on the CAP, are very concerned about being cut off from the rest of the city, having limits for emergency vehicles to get to us. And I think there are concerns from other parts of the city as well. So keep at it, please, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. We do have one more member of the public who would like to talk. Mr. Eduardo, you can unmute yourself and begin to talk now.
Again, I wanted to thank the XCAP members for your tireless work in this. I want to counter what Susan said and indicate that a lot of us, both on Churchill and on Southgate, are for the closing of Churchill. not just because it will help the safety of the kids, but because of all the work that the XCAP, ACOM, and transportation meeting groups have done to illustrate the fact that it is going to be better for the whole city, not just for the group in here and group around Churchill, but the whole city. That if we do what the XCAP has been saying, what ACOM has been saying, what the transportation team has been saying about addressing the issues around Oregon and Embarcadero, that we're going to be getting a better result for the city as a whole. And that I want to re-stress the fact that the analysis that have been done by the transportation group and the ACOM have indicated that 60 to 70% of the cars going through Churchill are using it as a bypass, that those cars would then be using Oregon and Embarcadero as a bypass rather than going through and endangering the thousands of children and students going to Palo, plus endangering the hundreds of children and kids that we have around Churchill and Southgate. All of the Southgate kids end up moving through on their bicycles through Churchill. And if we have the so-called 7,000 cars that are going through there that are bypassing, we're just creating a dangerous situation. And Embarcadero and Oregon are built for that. And so I would just urge the XCAP meeting to continue to use the great analysis work they're doing and looking at the whole city. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another member of the public who would like to speak. Rose McCanty, you can unmute yourself now and begin to speak.
Okay, thank you so much, Rose McEntee. I just wanted to echo Mr. Kennedy's comments. I support everything that he said. I think it's only 6 east-west rides where we can cross our city, and that is so insufficient that it bunches up traffic. Even so, with those 6, we can't afford to lose a crossing. I use that Churchill crossing myself, mostly on a bike, but I'm going everywhere in the city all the time, and we can't afford to lose any of these crossings. So I would also echo someone else who thank you for your hard work. Thanks, that's all.
Thank you. At this time, there are no other members of the public who wish to speak at oral communications.
Great, thank you so much. I did want to, so Susan Newman, you had asked about the agenda. It is up on the website. I just wanted to point out a difference in how we've posted agendas previously. We now have just one document linked, which is the agenda. And then within that agenda are all of the links to the attachments. So they're all within the agenda now. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone sees that change. You can find all of the attachments in there. I also wanted to bring to everyone's attention, Sarah Wilson has helped us do the tremendous effort of getting all of the public comments that we've gotten and batched them together for us, and they're now available. So when you open up the agenda, on the bottom section, you'll see public comments, and we have 2 attachments. One is from April 1st to April 30th, and another one is from May 1st to May 6th at noon, which is the latest she could pull those together for us. But that shows everyone the public comments that XCAP has been getting. XCAP receives these via email, but we just wanted to be sure that the audience also has a fast and easy way to be able to see the feedback that we're getting and maybe build on other people's ideas. So I just want to call that out. Sarah has also helped us upload on the website the summaries of the meetings. And so I just wanted to thank her again for that work. I can't remember if there's a few more missing. I actually haven't had a chance to look at it myself. I just found out that she was able to do that, but I did want to thank her for getting that up. And again, that's so that folks don't have to listen to all 3 hours of our meetings and have kind of a quick summary of what happened at those meetings. Also wanted to make sure everyone's aware that for the meeting where we had Sebastian Petty of Caltrain come and speak, and also when we had Norm Mattioni, the attorney, come and speak, those are going to be meetings where a transcript is going to be provided. And there's a service that's doing that for us. They're a little bit delayed because there was some kind of miscommunication there, but we should be getting those up on the website soon. So again, those will be the documents, if you recall, that XCAP wanted to include in the agenda in the appendices of our final report. And so we'll have those documents for later use. So wanted to make sure everyone is was aware of those changes and hopefully has been able to find the agenda now so they can follow along at home. Okay, so we're moving to agenda item number 3, which is approve the work plan and estimated timeline updates in light of COVID-19. So this is an item that was on the agenda last week. As we discussed, we're in sort of unprecedented times and we're trying to move slowly and be responsive to both what's happening in our immediate environment, what's happening at the city, and what's happening with the XCAP process overall. And so I think Philip has a bit of an update. Larry and I did meet with Philip and Ed to talk about the schedule going forward and some of the things that are planned and how COVID is sort of changing what we're doing in our timeline. And so I'll let Philip give the update about that, and then we can bring it back for discussion.
Thank you. So as Nadia mentioned, we had shared this at the last meeting. However, it wasn't an action item, and actually it's probably good that we didn't because we've had some time to sharpen our pencils and rethink some things, and had a very good meeting with Nadia and Larry where we talked about potential timeframes and figuring out how to make things work. And I'm not going to pull up the thing, but feel free to pull it up yourself. But I think what it showed in there is that we would conduct a town hall in the vague period of May. Realistically, switching to this completely different format and getting it going is going to be a tough pull to get it done in May, but also we want to be able to present complete information as we have it. So we need to go through this process. We're meeting, next week with the technical committee to go over Meadow Charleston and all that. So our plan at current is to schedule virtual on-demand town halls as we displayed last week. That would be 2 separate town halls potentially, one for Churchill and then another one for Meadow Charleston. And the plan is to have those virtual town halls, assuming that we still cannot meet in person at that point, and have them up for multiple days, 3 days or longer, each one of them, have office hours at those different town halls where you could talk to somebody or provide a comment and all that. Of course, you could provide a comment at any time. We'd want to track engagement and also allow different opportunities to discuss different things. So that's kind of what we're thinking about for the town halls. So that would likely, if we can pull it together, be in early June. And a recommendation that Larry had specifically was that we push the 2 tentatively, not really firmly scheduled, but they say tentative XCAP meetings in June to the 2nd and 4th week to facilitate that interaction. And I guess with that those are the primary comments that I have on the current work plan. And I guess I'll turn it back to you, Chair Naik, to see if you have any further comments.
Thanks. Yeah, so I guess just sort of what we discussed last week or 2 weeks ago with XCAP is that we're trying to make them shorter meetings, 2 hours instead of 3 hours, because we recognize 3-hour Zoom call is pretty exhausting for everybody. And also because we want to allow time, we realize that grade separations for some people are still super important. For others, they're kind of caught up in their lives post-COVID, and we want to be sensitive to that. But also Larry and I felt strongly that we needed to, we're going to be getting new information from AECom about the Charleston Meadow options. And we did get some new information last time about Churchill. And we want to be sure that the community has a chance to respond to that, but also importantly, to give any suggestions or improvements to those ideas that have come forth. I mean, even since when those ideas were first brought forth by the folks who did them, we've had a lot of great feedback and iterations for the Churchill one. I'm sure when we start to talk about Meadow and Charleston, there will be more. But the importance of trying to make those the best alternatives possible. So when XCAP is going to give their final recommendations to council, we have kind of the best versions, or even multiple versions if that's where we end up of a particular alternative. So really, we're just trying to allow for that in the schedule. Having said that, we're also very sensitive to how much of XCAP members' time we take up. And so I'm trying to keep in touch with XCAP members to make sure that they can still participate in these meetings and that they're not overloaded with these meetings. We did have noticed that, unfortunately, Pat Lau is not going to be able to continue with XCAP. She's actually been working on the front line of sorts at Webster House with a lot of the seniors there, and her schedule just makes it very difficult for us to, or for her to be able to participate at the XCAP meetings at this time. I haven't had a chance to touch base with her yet, but I hope to do so. But you know, we are slowly dwindling in numbers, and it would be a shame to lose the work that we've done so far. So we are still trying to kind of go slow, but still maintain a steady enough pace to not lose the institutional knowledge that we do have, and at least get to some final report. So Larry, I don't know if you wanted to say a few more words about what we discussed, and then I want to open it up to XCAP members to see if they've got suggestions, thoughts on the timeline. Oh. Maybe Larry's struggling with his mute unmute.
There we go.
There you go.
I wanted to pick up on our new estimated completion date of August 30th or 31st. And we didn't pick that out of the air. It was based on the number of having 2 meetings a month between now and then, and estimating what things we had to get done, and then writing of the report and review of the report. And it's sort of, if you take where we were before with the deadline of April 30th, but we were then talking about having more meetings than twice a month. Anyway, you extrapolate all that stuff, and I think that it's reasonable that we can get done by August 30th.
Great. Okay, XCAPers, I will, I'll ask you to raise your hand if you want to, if you have a comment about the schedule or thoughts about the August 31st as a new deadline, about the town halls, and I'll just take them as I see them. Megan, go ahead, I see yours first. You can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Nadia. I was just trying to understand the attachment. So is this attachment is no longer up to date, the schedule that's attached?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, so for a little bit of description, the boxes you see should all be shifted in the May, June columns, basically, on under the meetings schedule. As far as the virtual town hall, those are being pushed to June. And so expanded community engagement would move into June, July, with an ultimate final date of August 31st. What I hope to have for our next XCAP meeting is an updated version of this spreadsheet, so it makes more sense. We really just didn't have time to fix the boxes based on what's been happening. And frankly, it's been a moving target because, for example, I'm supposed to give a city council update May 18th, and I was just informed that that's probably going to have to be bumped to June. So, you know, we're playing with a moving schedule here, but yeah, we will provide you with a better spreadsheet that has more accurate dates.
I was wondering about the deliberations specifically, since they don't actually, even on this original draft, have proposed dates. So what is the proposed timeline for that?
So in the top section, when it says estimated remaining work for the XCAP, you'll see that we have some placeholders in terms of how many meetings it'll be for the noise information that's coming, any additional traffic analysis for Meadow and Charleston. We have 1 to 2 meetings set aside for Churchill deliberations. And then here it has only 1 for Meadow Charleston. I'm going to guess it's probably 2. And so these are some of the placeholders that we have. Obviously, it's going to depend on how things are going. You know, if we find a common ground really quickly, maybe that can be shortened. But again, and you know, obviously a lot of this depends on whether we start to be able to have more in-person meetings that are socially distant, or we're going to keep going on Zoom and how that sort of impacts things.
Thank you.
Greg, I see your hand next, and then after that, Phil.
Yeah, I think an input to the schedule is what do we think AECOM's proposed schedule is. So for instance, we are We reviewed engineering work for the alternative for Churchill. I have not seen any engineering work for the Meadow and Charleston alternative, and I don't think we can really deliberate in any real way on that alternative until we have, some engineering work on that on what's been proposed.
Yeah, so the technical working group is meeting at the middle of next week to look at new stuff from AECOM. And then that will come to XCAP at our next meeting, if I have that correct. Philip, is that what you have? You have AECOM?
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, the technical working group is meeting next Wednesday to review it, and then following meeting on May 20th will be the meeting where AECOM's doing their full presentation on that.
Yeah, great, because it sounds like various neighbors and people who send us emails have seen a lot of details on these proposals, but I haven't. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks.
Great. So Phil, you're next, and then I see Larry.
Yeah, so I can appreciate the idea that the virtual town halls are being pushed out to June because we're already into May and there's been no publicity on them. What I'm concerned about is, given the situation we're in right now, where people are just, especially with children homeschooling and the like, how much time will be needed to adequately publicize these virtual town halls, and what methods will we use to sort of break through the noise? That's it.
Yeah, so that's stuff we're still working on, I'll say, regarding the how we'll publicize it, but there's quite a few various different outlets that we can use to do that, and we're working with the chief communications officer. But I think the benefit to having be virtual, and in the light of the fact that it's quite likely that it would be virtual, is that it can be up for more than one day. But we can do things like use our social media to announce it, to tell people that, hey, we're going to have a live chat at this time, or AMA, kind of like a Reddit AMA, ask me anything, for maybe like Gary from Hexagon or somebody, from city staff or otherwise. So I think the opportunity is that we can provide it, and actually it can be up 24 hours a day, so somebody can access it at any time. You're right. The challenge that you're presenting, I think, is valid, that it's going to be about getting the word out. But, if this is any indication, we're continuing to have attendance at these XCAP meetings and the last one. So somehow the word about this is getting out. Definitely our chief communications officer is going to be working on strategies for getting the word out.
So Philip, I would like to say that while I appreciate that, we're still getting a small minority of the citizens involved. And I don't want a situation where people find out after the fact that major decisions were made, they didn't have a chance to provide input. So I'm going to volunteer myself, at least. I won't speak for other XCAP members, and you should consider us as extensions of your staff for the purposes of leveraging our time, effort, and social networks to get the word out. But we need coordinated messaging, so we're all consistent. Messaging on what's at stake, how we're going to do this, why people need to get involved. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think that actually we will probably take you up on that. And I guess what I'd like to do is provide the messaging to everybody, and anybody that wants to share it or can share it, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I think it has to come from you, because if it comes from us on the XCAP, we're going to get 12 different messages and people will be confused. We need a central focus, and that central focus has to be you.
Yep.
Our job is to repeat the talking points.
Yep, I agree. Thank you.
Larry, you think you had your hand up?
I wanted to follow up on what Greg said and what Phil Burton said. As to Greg, absolutely right that we wanted to get the information out, the updated information out about Charleston and Meadow before we had a town hall meeting. So that's why we switched, and that's why that's coming to us 2 weeks from now. And so we'll have, oh my, I've gone blank. Sorry, I sort of lost you all. Are you hearing me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, my screen went blank for some reason. Anyway, that's the schedule. As to what Phil Burton had to say, absolutely right. Nadia and I really sort of hammered on staff to say there has to be a really big effort to publicize this, that we've gotten our expectations have become too low when we think that we're doing great if we have 40 or 50 people turn out. Those 40 or 50 people hardly ever represent anybody outside of the immediately affected neighborhoods. And since this, we assume somewhere down the line is going to require a citywide vote, we want to have people from other neighborhoods get involved. And it may be an advantage to be able to do this on a virtual basis, but we still have to get out lots of publicity in all types of ways that we can. And so couldn't agree more with what Phil Burton had to say.
And just to follow on to that, one more thing that I did mention earlier, but I just want to reiterate, but it's of importance because of this comment, is that we want to be able to track engagement at these events. So, as much as, yeah, we want to be able to know how many people visited us and potentially from, where they live and all of that. So we can really understand who has visited us or who has visited the virtual town hall, which is a little bit different than counting hands or actually seeing people physically. So could be, people are visiting multiple times as well. So that is another component.
Did anybody else want to speak on this? Any other XCAPers? No. Philip, I'm realizing because we don't have an updated version of this agenda, do we still want to approve the work plan? I mean, we could approve the August 31st as the target deadline, and that town halls will be roughly in June, but frankly, the town halls are not XCAP's responsibility, they're the city's. So I'm not sure what you kind of need procedurally. And then I also see Phil still has a hand up. I don't know if he still wants to speak or if that's something else, and then Keith. So, but if you want,
I was just going to say procedurally, you could approve it with modifications as you so choose, and so I might recommend that you approve it with the modifications of the June town hall meetings, which is currently shown as May, so it's not very specific currently. And note that this is not a real specific set date agenda, but also modifications of those XCAP meetings to non-tentative meetings on the 2nd and 4th rather than 1st and 3rd, if that's what you so wish to do. And your deliberation or your, I guess, completion date or whatever.
So that would put our next XCAP meeting would stay May 20th, and then we would have one on June 10th and then one June 24th. I just want to get that out there. Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, this question about AECOM support. When I look at the schedule on that last page, most of the AECOM's work disappears at the end of April. Is that just because we don't have any work for them, or their contract ending? And the reason I ask is I suspect there's going to be some refinement desired on the Charleston Meadow, and will they be able to do that, or will they be out of pocket?
So sorry, and I'm not sure what date you said that, but that's actually because they're showing completion of those products. It's not because their contract is going to be expired or anything like that. That's just showing completion dates of the estimated completion dates for the work.
Okay, so if we did have some iteration work for them, they still would be on contract and be able to do that for us.
Yeah, I believe so. Of course, that comes down to contract terms and dollars and all of that.
Yeah, within reason, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did want to note the one thing that's on the schedule. So below the second gray line, we have on there review noise analysis, Philip. If I recall, there was a question about whether it was just about noise or noise and vibration. And I thought Ed was going to circle back with that. Do we have any update on that?
Yes, I can give you an update on that. I don't know that that's specifically on this.
It's on the schedule as.
Yes, it's on the schedule, but you'll have to give me a second to find my email on it. But essentially, the scope does include vibration. But I can pull up the real specific scope for you and read it, and then maybe that'll be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So as a reminder to XCAP, so at our next meeting, we should be getting an update from AECOM about Meadow Charleston, and then potentially also whatever Philip's about to read us about kind of generalized noise and vibration information. And I will say that we have not had a chance to finish putting together the agenda because we're meeting in 2 weeks. But one thing I'll try to balance is we may need the entire meeting just focused on the new alternatives and then save the noise and vibration for the meeting after, because I don't want to have a 3-hour meeting. I really want to try to keep it to 2 hours. So as a scheduling, but
so I found the email, Nadia, if you'd like to hear it. It's just the vibration analysis is included, and some excerpts from the scope is predict project vibration levels and impacts. Similar to predicted noise levels, project vibration levels will be calculated using the FTA's Transit Noise and Vibration Impact Assessment Manual. And there will be a noise and vibration technical report, which will have the results in a concise technical report. The report will provide an alternative analysis with a side-by-side comparison of potential noise and vibration impacts for each of the alternatives analyzed.
Okay.
That's just a brief kind of summary of that response to that question.
But
Okay.
this is what they're going to give us, that information, or this is the information?
No, that's the scope of their work that they will be doing.
It would be great to have that before any town halls, because like 95% of the emails received mention noise and vibration as a reason to prefer one alternative or another. So having, actual engineering information about that, I think would help a lot. So,
That's a great point. So maybe we can release the information, Philip, once we've got it, but for the May 20th XCAP meeting. And that way, even if we can't discuss it until June 10th at XCAP, at least the information's been, well, I don't know. I think we kind of want to discuss it before it goes to the town hall.
It'd be really nice if we can get to it at the next meeting, which
Yeah.
I believe is the plan. It's going to be a very AECOM heavy meeting, so hopefully we could hone in on it. That's actually one of the reasons why I think this meeting's really critical, to get the other things out of the way so that we can have AECOM give their whole show at the next meeting if possible. Understanding that we do want to stay away from the 3-hour meetings if possible.
Okay, well, then I'm wondering if we should keep with the original schedule of tentative meetings, which would be May 20th and June 3rd, and then have the town hall the second week in June and the fourth week in June, right? So that we can continue to have those meetings, and so that everything has been made public to XCAP at an XCAP meeting before it goes to a town hall meeting. Because traditionally what we've also done is the XCAP has provided feedback on things that were to be in the town hall.
Sorry, I'm just catching up on text messages. We have a thread of text messages that's managing this meeting, and I just want to note that one of our staff that's helping to manage panelists on this has lost his power. So PG&E says
Okay.
power is out until 7 p.m. He's still trying to help us, but I'm sorry to get sidetracked. It is related to the meeting. Yeah, if that makes sense, that would provide us that opportunity potentially.
Okay, so then I think, well, does any other XCAP member have anything else to say on this before we have to go to public comment, and then we can come back for a motion? Okay, seeing no XCAP members, I will turn it over to Ruchika. So Ruchika, we're going to take public comment now. If any member of the audience has a comment for item number 3, which is the work plan and estimated timelines going forward, it would be awesome if you could digitally raise your hand so Ruchika could acknowledge you and we can give you 2 minutes.
Okay, I have a member of the public, Susan Newman, who would wish to talk. Please feel free to unmute yourself and you can begin talking now.
Hi, I don't have much. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate Nadia's point about getting the AECOM meetings sort of pat through the XCAP process before you have the town hall meetings, because I think it's very confusing when there's kind of one line of communication coming from staff and there's something else going on with XCAP, and XCAP and staff haven't integrated whatever it is that they're going to present. So good idea. That's it.
Thank you. We have another member of the public, Rachel Kellerman. You can begin, you can unmute yourself and you can begin to talk now.
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to, this is about sort of public engagement. I wanted to thank Megan Kahn for her service for representing the entire north of Embarcadero, both on the CAP and the XCAP. And just thank her for her service, and just wondering how the XCAP members are planning to engage with our community and now that Megan is going to the much less difficult arena of DC.
At this time, I don't see any other members who would like to speak at this agenda item.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say, as the XCAP members were selected because we represent different sections of the community in different areas of the community, but we don't really have a per neighborhood representative. So despite the fact that it's a huge loss for us that Megan's going off to DC, although she remains our best hope for federal funding. Hi, Megan. You know, I wanted to encourage anybody can reach out to any of the XCAP members at any time, and we're all available. Just because we may not live exactly in your neighborhood, we're all still here. And, you know, we've been following every sort of thread of this thing. I can tell you, I probably know as much about the Meadow Charleston side as I do about Churchill, and vice versa for those who live in the South. So we're here for everybody. Going back to the schedule, I think, Philip, we should probably, I don't think we should take any action other than maybe having the August 31st be a hard deadline. And we can come back next on May 20th with a firm, well thought out Excel spreadsheet that really shows all the upcoming dates to avoid any confusion. Because I think we're still a little unclear on where all those dates would be. So if someone wants to make a motion for the August 31st deadline, that would be awesome. You can raise your hand digitally or physically. I saw Larry. Okay, Larry, I'll give you the floor.
Well, I so move that we, it's not totally up to us. So I think what we're doing, I think, is to say, this is the date we're suggesting to the city council when Nadia makes a report to the council shortly, and that's a later item on the agenda. But I think that that's what we want to be suggesting, so that's what I move.
Great. Does anyone want a second, Larry? Anyone?
I'll second Larry.
Thank you, Greg. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Not particularly. I mean, I think that it's important to have some sort of a deadline to keep the momentum going. It's very hard to predict, but I think that you know, this process has gone on for a long time. It sounds like we're going to have a lot of good information by then, so works for me.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to call the roll. I have to call the roll in alphabetical order. So when you hear your name, if you can unmute yourself and say your vote. So Gregory Burrell.
Yes.
Phil Burton.
Yes.
Tony Carrasco is not here. In-Young Cho.
Yes.
Megan Kahn.
Yes.
Larry Klein.
Yes.
Patricia Lau is absent. Adina Levin is absent. I vote aye. Keith Recknell.
Yes.
Dave Shen.
Yes.
And Carrie Templeton.
Yes.
Okay. Hopefully whoever was counting the votes, I think it might be Ruchika or Sarah. I've lost track at this point. You got all those?
I think
Yes,
it was
this is Sarah. I got the votes. It's unanimous.
Perfect. Awesome. What was that, Larry?
I think it was eight of us are present.
Yes, exactly. Okay, great. So with that, we'll move on to item number 2. This is
Nine.
sorry, item number 4. I don't know where I am. Review and approve the follow-up of the list of XCAP questions. So the staff got back to us on our extensive list of questions, and I'm hoping all the XCAP members had a chance to go through it. And if you had any questions about what staff put in there or wanted clarifications, now would be the time to discuss those. I think, well, does anybody have anything on this item? Does anyone have any questions? Did they maybe not understand what staff had put as an answer to one of the questions? How do you guys feel about what we got back?
This looks very similar to what we saw last time. Has anything changed?
No, I don't think we went into detail on it, and I wanted to give everyone a chance, like if there's something that we disagreed with or were confused by or it was unclear, then that would be helpful.
I do want to call attention to, I think it's number 5, that says there may be funding available for programs that, quote, increase the safety and mobility of non-motorized users. There are a number of aspects we're working on here that could be in that category, and it sounds like there might be applications due soon, and I wonder if anyone in the staff or the city council is considering trying to apply for funding for even a portion of this work, or if we're just simply not ready.
Yeah, I think this, unfortunately, is something that I've shared a few times, but in order for us to apply, and frankly, any grade separation is going to be an improvement for, the non-motorized users. So yeah, we do believe that we'll have a project that could be applicable for these funds, but this is very similar to all of the other funding opportunities that are available that we really need to select an alternative and start moving into an environmental process. That's when the funding actually can become applicable.
So is there anything we can do? For instance, I know last time we spoke about bicycle underpass near Churchill that might not be dependent on the rest of these grade crossing presentations. Is there anything we can do to move any portion of this forward? It sounds like no, but I guess I feel like I want to ask the question.
So as a separate project, your transportation team, the Office of Transportation, looks for funding for, bike and ped improvements all the time. So if there was a separate project, not in relation to the grade separation, we're always looking for those types of funding opportunities. And quite frankly, we get quite a few different grant opportunities, but, it's not always, we have a selected list of projects that we follow that ties to our bike and ped plan. That's not to say that these projects couldn't fit within the bike and ped plan or don't fit within the bike and ped plan, but there's also challenges with applying for grant funding in Palo Alto, which is, I could go into the long list of them at another point, but it's something that the Office of Transportation always is working on.
Okay, so if there was anything we could do, just let us know. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Most significantly, part of the conversation that we had with Philip offline was completing the XCAP process allows the city to be able to at least do something. And that is basically why we're really trying hard, even under these very difficult circumstances, to come to some sort of conclusion so that that work can be taken forward if there is funding available, especially after COVID, that we could make use of that funding. So anybody else have anything on the list of questions or anything that they disagreed with the questions or didn't feel you got the answer you were looking for when you asked staff the question? Nobody? Okay, I had a few things. So Philip, on number 3, when we asked about the Stanford station, at a previous meeting, I had sent the city some historical information about an easement agreement between the city of Palo Alto and I think it was PAUSD at Stanford and others. Has there been any does this answer reflect that information, or would this need to be updated, or is it impacted in any way by that? Do we know what the status is on that?
No, I can't say what the status is to that. I'll tell you what the answer reflects is the response that we received from Caltrain.
Okay, but we don't know whether what I sent to you was also sent to Caltrain, and have we double checked that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to follow up.
Okay, so I'd flag that one as definitely needing some follow-up. Then also under, let's see, under the hybrid, number 10, the question was whether the hybrid assumptions for Meadow Charleston were using the road widths of today. And it says that, yes, they assume the final lane configuration that we have today. So I just wanted to highlight that means that we might actually be expanding capacity more than we intended. And that's, I think, the same is true under the viaduct scenario and the trench. So that would be something that we'd need to note going forward. But I just want to make sure everybody saw that. Okay, so I don't think we need to move these either, because if there's if we need to add to this list, this is where we could keep going. So I think procedurally we could probably just continue with this unless anybody really wants to move them now. I don't see anybody. And actually, before we do any of that, I would need to take public comment to see if the public has anything to say on this item. So again, I'll turn it over to Ruchika. And if you're a member of the public and you have read through the number 4 or list of XCAP questions and answers that we received, and you wanted to comment on those, now would be a great time to raise your hand so we can give you 2 minutes to speak.
I don't see any raised hands
Everybody's
for this agenda item.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, since I don't think we actually need to take action, I think we can move on to the next one. That works for everybody? Yes, thumbs up. Okay. All right, action. So number 5, which is review the impact of the Caltrain emails related to 4 tracks and any necessary actions. I just want to say up front, it's not that we were anticipating any action, but we didn't want to make the mistake that we made the last time where we didn't schedule something so that we could take action. So that's why it was phrased that way. But it's not that there's any specific action intended. Obviously, at the last meeting, we did not have the emails in front of us when Philip and our city manager were making reference to them. So I wanted to give XCAPers who've now had a chance to read those emails a chance to sort of respond and react, and thoughts on those, and what is everybody, how are you guys feeling about those emails, and what are you thinking? So you guys can put up your hands so I know when to call on you, or wave at me. Everybody, nobody's got anything to say on these.
We can literally wave our hand, right?
Yes, exactly. Phil, go ahead. Oh, Phil, you're muted, actually. You're muted. You need to unmute yourself. Oh, actually, try one more time. Okay, now talk. Oh, we can't hear you, Phil. It shows that you're not muted, but your audio is dead. Is your headset still plugged in, or did maybe you lose power on the headset? Still can't hear you. See your lips moving. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of waving. Actually, now it shows that you're muted. Do you want to try unmuting yourself one more time and see if that works? Nope, nothing. Okay, Phil. If you want to text me a question, you could try that. I don't know, or I don't know how else to get you in here. I'll move to Megan, and hopefully you can work on your technical issues. Megan?
Thanks, Nadia. My question was about how we think these emails might relate to, there was one of the Churchill closure options that had the bike pedestrian underpass using Caltrain land, like adjacent to Alma, in order to go down under and back up, kind of similar to yeah, not really similar to anything, but that was an option. And so I'm wondering whether that's still on the table. And if we think that, whether it's clear that Caltrain's letters have any impact on that alternative.
Okay, so you're wanting sort of more clarity on what the impact would be on all alternatives, if I'm hearing that correctly?
Yeah, like, is the issue more about is there concern more around the encroachment of the roadway, or is it equally concerning if we're encroaching with some bike pedestrian infrastructure?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And obviously there's nobody here necessarily to give a response. I don't think Phil has anything beyond what we got in the emails. Is that correct, Phil?
Not that I want to put him on the spot, but I do see Jim Lightbody as one of our attendees. I don't know if he's familiar with the emails that we're referencing or has a response. I guess if he did, he could raise his hand.
Yeah. Okay. Jim, if you feel bold at any moment and want to raise your hand, Ruchika will signal to me. Otherwise, and I did want to, I realized I didn't give much of an intro to this topic. Oh, he's feeling bold. I'm gonna let him speak.
Yeah, so hi, yes, Jim Lightbody, you are welcome to unmute yourself and begin to speak now.
Great.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I am familiar with the emails, so if there are questions, I'll be glad to try to respond.
Great. And so maybe what we can do is we can hear all the questions, and then we can let Jim have his best attempt at responding to everybody. That might be the easiest way to kind of talk through this. So I'll ask XCAPers to raise their hand. I see Greg Braille.
Yeah, hi. I think part of it is just for us trying to understand who we're talking to. We have Melissa Reggiardo at Samtrans. Is she on the Caltrain board? Does she represent Caltrain? Because the patchwork of stuff around here is terribly confusing. So I rely on all of you to help explain it to us. So that's one question: is who are we speaking to, and how authoritative is this person? And second, my interpretation of the very top letter is, unless things change, they're going to have to plan as if there's going to be a 4-track section somewhere in Palo Alto, and they have to assume that Palo Alto needs to let it be anywhere in Palo Alto, but it doesn't have to be the entire length of Palo Alto. So perhaps if we gave them a comprehensive plan that showed where it might go if it had to go, they would be okay with backing down on the concept that it has to be 4 tracks through the entire town. Is that at all an accurate interpretation? And that's actually rather hopeful, because if their position is we need to be able to have 4 tracks the entire length of Palo Alto, then, there's very little we can do.
Right. Phil, were you able to fix your audio? Nope, we can't hear you. I don't know what happened. Phil, try taking out the headsets completely and just using your microphone on your computer and see if that works. Nope. No idea what's going on there. Okay, anybody else? Any other XCAPers have a kind of question for Jim Lightbody? Okay. Okay, Jim, I think they promoted you to panelist, so you can now speak if you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I guess I am unmuted. Yeah, I think I don't want to speak on too much on behalf of Caltrain. I think the response they sent kind of speaks for itself. Melissa is the manager of planning. She reports to Sebastian Petty. And so we're dealing with staff responses at this point based on the work. And I think the key is that they mentioned they're at this point taking a conservative approach in what they think is needed because this hasn't been developed yet. So that's reflected in the response you got.
Great. Well, and so there's staff, but then there's the board, Greg, so that, you know, whatever things, if the city wanted to negotiate with Caltrain, it would be our city manager and council signing letters that they would send to the Caltrain board, and it happens at that level. So as he said, right now it's just sort of a staff discussion. I think it's worth everybody appreciating, if you haven't had a chance to read the emails fully, is that Caltrain has adopted a rail corridor use policy, which is basically designed to be a super broad guiding principle for their entire 50 miles from San Francisco to, I think down to Gilroy. I'm not sure if it's San Jose or Gilroy, but it's past Palo Alto, let's put it that way. And so they're attempting to apply that in the most conservative way here. But it's worth noting that at least at Churchill, we already encroach on the right of way with one of our turning lanes, actually. So the plan that they're referencing in these line of questions would encroach further. But to Megan's question, is it more about the encroachment of the car lanes or the bike lanes, or kind of what's what? And I think, you know, something that is interesting is how does this impact the options that we have in South Palo Alto? And so I think when we get into because it's not like they were going to get a direct response from Caltrain at this phase, because they're not there yet and we're not there yet. One of the things I would suggest for XCAP is that, you know, if and when we get to deliberations and this becomes a topic, we could present to the council, you know, what are the potential implications that we see, what are the inconsistencies in what we see, and sort of set the table for them to then, depending on what a recommendation is, move forward as they see fit. But basically making them aware of kind of all the things that we intuitively understood from reading these emails. And that's probably the best that we can hope for, to not bog down this process and still be able to get to some suggestion. So for example, if we were to recommend the partial underpass, we would flag this as saying, well, this is a potential issue, but we also had the following comments on the emails that we got, something along those lines. That's how I see.
I mean, if the council or the city manager is going to go negotiate with the Caltrain board, it seems like there's two tacks they take. They could take the, no, you can't have 4 tracks in this part of Palo Alto, but you can have 4 tracks in that part of Palo Alto. I think that we can hear you, Phil. That's awesome. I think that might be productive. They could also take the tack that, we don't really believe in high-speed rail. You don't need 4 tracks. It'll never happen. To me, that would be unproductive, although probably popular with the people who live in Palo Alto. So there you go.
So I did see, so Phil, do you want to, I see your hand, I saw Keith Rectals, and then I saw Larry as well. So Phil.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Don't ask, I can't explain it, so I won't try. My concern is that this new position of the full Palo Alto 4-track option is a new requirement, if you will, or a new option. And I'd like to know what, if anything, has changed in their thinking, other than perhaps, how do I say this graciously? Maybe I can't say it graciously. But what's the reason for it? Because we've heard for a long time that they would need something in Palo Alto going into Mountain View. And that's really a question for Caltrain.
Okay. Keith?
There you go. I still, when I look at the satellite view, I don't know if we can even squeeze 4 tracks in here. Has anyone done good measurements to figure out whether we could, even if we wanted to, put 4 tracks?
We lost Jim Lightbody. I was hoping to ask him that question.
Well, hello, everyone. I just wanted to let you know, join the meeting. And for what it's worth on this topic, I will share that I had some early discussions with Sebastian Petty as it relates to the ability to fit it in that area. And I would say it was within a few feet of what they were suggesting would be required. So from Caltrain's perspective, I think they would call it potentially possible. And, you know, while practically speaking, it's a whole other matter. But again, they were operating at the time at a very sketch planning level. And I don't know, quite frankly, that there's been a whole lot further development since. This would be about a year ago.
Great. I did want to acknowledge. So I saw Larry had his hand up, and then I saw Inyang. So Larry?
Yes, I did not read that this to mean that there was a departure from, by this the email, departure from the 4-track just being passing tracks. And Greg has raised the question, and I think Jim should be able to answer that. We're only talking about passing tracks, or is the Caltrain now thinking that they want to run 4 tracks from the Menlo Park border to the Mountain View border?
So oh, here's Jim. Great.
Sorry, yeah, I can briefly respond on that. There are 2 options. If you recall, there was the medium service option, which required a passing track at one of the stations in Santa Clara, in Palo Alto or Mountain View. And then there was the high service plan that required a continuous passing track for some distance in the Palo Alto Mountain View section. But as we've talked about, probably not the full length, but somewhere in between there. And I don't know that they've done further work to determine, what the optimal length of that would be, and certainly not, haven't selected a particular location yet.
Yeah, and Larry, I wanted to make clear, this had showed up on previous Caltrain presentations where they had what they called illustrative examples. And they had always shown the illustrative example being after Cal Ave. So basically between Cal Ave and Mountain View. And this is the first time that they've walked it back to the more conservative somewhere in this area. But as Ed said, when you do the math, they might leave it as a potential, but they're within just a few feet of being able to really squeeze that in there. So. As I said earlier, the way I see it is that we're probably not going to get an answer on these specifics by the August 31st, which is our intended deadline for this process. So whatever we decide to do, we would have to put in our caveats and what other information we could lay out for council when they'd be considering these options to be able to kind of maneuver around this particular, with this obstacle in mind, I'd say. Adina, I see you raising your hand. You're still muted, Adina. You're muted.
Okay. Okay, I unmuted, and sorry, I had another meeting that overlapped with this one, and I apologize if I missed something relevant. Please, someone share me a link if someone has been taking notes that I can catch up. But Nadia was mentioning the fact that Caltrain had these illustrative examples that were shorter than what Caltrain is now saying is the most conservative, but it's also almost surely not Caltrain's intent to prevent the city of Palo Alto from doing a grade separation, because grade separation will help Caltrain achieve greater frequency and capacity. So is there any way, if Palo Alto wants to move forward and make a decision to, reach an agreement about some narrower set of right-of-way that Caltrain needs to protect, that would still achieve the goal? So if Palo Alto was trying to do something that prohibited Caltrain from achieving the goal, I could see why Caltrain would be saying, like, heck no. But if there's a way for Caltrain to achieve the goal and Caltrain wants Palo Alto to have a grade separation, is there any way to meet in the middle on this?
Yeah. Well, and so what I was saying earlier, Dina, was that more than likely this is something that if and when XCAP makes a specific recommendation, let's say, for example, we made a recommendation for the partial underpass and the underpasses in South Palo Alto, you'd have the opportunity there to say, well, hey, we've selected for South Palo Alto an alternative where 4 tracks would fit if we needed them. So could we negotiate on the Churchill situation?
Yeah.
Or, something along those lines, which is what I think Greg Braille was saying. So I think we have to leave it open. It's also not worth expending political capital this early in the process until we really know what are the alternatives that not only XCAP is recommending, but the council also supports and that we might be able to get behind as a community. We might have to kind of wait to see what's the right point to have that conversation with Caltrain, because frankly, also having it in the middle of COVID, it seems a little tone deaf.
a quick point. Can you hear me?
Yep, Phil, go ahead.
Okay, considering that Palo Alto downtown is the second highest passenger loading station on the rail line, it would not make sense to have some trains bypassing downtown Palo Alto, whereas California Avenue is much lighter loading. And there's plenty of space between, say, Churchill and Cal Ave to build out the 4-track switch and so on and so forth. So I think even on operational grounds, it doesn't really make sense to want to have 4 tracks running through Churchill per se. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Is there any other XCAP or who wants to talk about this before I go to?
Yeah, so I remember they specifically said they don't require 4-track on Churchill. This was one of the community meetings, Caltrain community information. I was pounding at it, and I don't know who spoke, but they specifically said they don't require 4-track on Churchill.
Yeah, I think we all acknowledge it's walking back a bit from what was originally represented in some of their documents, but because they're trying to choose the most conservative thing that's in line with this very broad policy that they've adopted corridor-wide, and now they're sort of applying it scenario by scenario, and this is the response that we're getting for Churchill, but I think we're all saying it might be negotiable, but not by us. Okay, is there any other XCAP before we go to public comment on this?
It just, I wanted to, the point that I was making is that I think that it might very well be negotiable, and therefore XCAP shouldn't completely refrain. XCAP should refrain from things that would really preclude Caltrain from doing its intent, but shouldn't refrain from something that would, allow Caltrain to achieve its intent, but not with a maximalist interpretation of all the options it would keep open for the next 40 years.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go to the members of the public who might want to speak on this item. Ruchika, I'm going to turn it over to you. And if you're a member of the public who wants to speak, this is item number 5, the review of the Caltrain emails related to 4 tracks. And please raise your hand if there's anybody who wants 2 minutes of public comment on this issue.
Also, please feel free to press *9 if you are attending this meeting through a phone line.
Okay.
I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Okay, so again, we have this scheduled as action, but it was just to allow for any potential action. So I don't think we need to do anything on this issue. So I think with that, we'll move to item number 6. So item number 6 is review and approve the chair's XCAP update number 5 to City Council. So Philip, did you want to update everyone on the timeline that we discussed about City Council? Or Ed?
Sorry, I'm just having some trouble unmuting. My mouse will not move to where the unmute is. Yeah, so just the item says that this is tentatively scheduled for May 18th, but due to scheduling conflicts and items that have been moved off the most recent agenda and really a full agenda, will be unfortunately pushing this item to early June.
Okay. So XCAP members, did you guys have a chance to read my sort of synopsis, and was there anything you wanted to add? Did I miss something? We have a couple of sections that are highlighted, which we can adjust based on the information that we got. So the first one I see is we didn't really do anything on the outstanding XCAP questions, so I'll just note that they were received and I think are final. Except the one that's remaining is the one that I flagged about the Stanford station. So I can update the report to reflect that. And then second is the noise and vibration information. I'll update that paragraph to reflect what Philip read out is the scope of work that we're expecting from AECOM in terms of getting both something about noise and vibration. But outside of that, did XCAPers have anything to add? Did we miss something? Do you think it's a fair assessment of where we are?
can I ask two slightly philosophical questions? I'm sorry.
Sure.
We are unfortunately losing two members.
Yes.
Do we want to ask the council to appoint replacements or continue with the remaining members?
Well, it's certainly up for discussion for the group. My concern is that for those of us who were CAP members before, we knew how hard it was to get the new XCAP members up to speed. And now just weeks before we start deliberating to add two new folks, I think would be really tough. And I would certainly not want to join that committee under those circumstances, right? But I think it's certainly up for the group to decide and discuss.
Yeah, I would tend to share your assessment, but I wonder if anyone else feels differently.
Anybody?
I think I would say, as one of the two people that's leaving, that I agree that if deliberations are going to happen within the span of 2 months, then I don't think that it makes sense to add a person or people at this time. I do hope that you all will be open to discussions with community members that might have had relationships with myself or Pat, and that you will, be willing to listen to their concerns or answer their questions. If this process for, unknown reasons continues on past August 31st, then that would be more of a concern for me, and things might need to be reassessed at that point.
Dave, I saw your hand up as well.
I was just thinking about this virus thing going on. I would think that it would be pretty tough to sign anybody up for anything at this point, simply because of that.
Yeah, agreed. And I did want to, in the next item, we're going to talk about working group updates. So that's when I'll ask each of you to kind of give us a sense of what life is like for you at home and how continuing on XCAP is working for you guys, because I do want to touch in base about that. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, just very briefly, for Megan and Pat, excuse me, if either of you have specific contacts or groups you've been working with, can you share them with us so they don't get cut off from information flows?
Yeah, happy to add them to any of our email blasts as well that we do already.
Absolutely. I can discuss that with you. I think I'll need to think about how to achieve that. I have done some amount of handoff to other community members, not on the XCAP, but I will reach out to Nadia and maybe Phil if you're interested.
Great, thank you. Carrie, I saw your hand go up, I thought.
You did. Thank you. I wanted to say I support the chair's recommendation on this. I think it was pretty hard to come up to speed, and there's a lot of information here. If you did want to include some rationale about that in your update to City Council, you could probably provide some alternatives, such as members of the community that have been participating regularly could be a pool from which they could choose if they did feel the need to backfill or something like that. But yeah, I agree with what you said earlier about how hard it will be to pull new people in at this point.
Well, so my plan was, if there was a lot of interest in recruiting new people, then I would formally agendize it for our next meeting, because technically it's not something we can vote on, or it's not really appropriate for us to add it probably to the council update without having had it agendized for a public meeting so that the public could weigh in on that. But it doesn't sound like there's interest generally among the group to even have that agendized. So I think we'll just leave that as, if council were to ask about it, we can talk about it, but it's not, we're not going to formally put an agenda as such.
Seems fine. Thank you.
Does that sound right with the Brown Act? I'm looking at you because you have the most experience here, or Ed, either way.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm just saying we didn't really agendize a conversation on adding XCAP members. So I'm just, unless there's interest from the group, it's probably not something we would agendize and or put in the report.
I think that's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, and so anybody else have anything that I might have missed in my report, or something that you think we need to flag for council, noting that we will be having another XCAP meeting on May 20th, which will probably still be one more opportunity for us to amend this letter in any way before we show up at council in June something or another. So if you missed something today, we probably will have another bite at the apple, but you'll need to let me know. Greg, yeah?
I assume that due to COVID, our mission has not changed. And we still believe that pursuing grade separations makes sense. I don't know if it's worth, for one, if people disagree, that other than some of the emailers who we've received, that would be interesting. But also, is that something that we want to reiterate to the council?
Sure. So I think Larry and I were operating under the assumption that if the council decides to tell us that we have to stop, they'll tell us we have to stop, and otherwise we keep going. So with that, and in some ways, Philip's plea that if we hurry up and finish, we might be able to get some money somewhere, but we've got to get something going. That's kind of been the philosophy that's been driving this process. And so we didn't put anything in the council's report because we assume council always has a prerogative to tell us, yeah, you guys need to stop. And so unless they tell us, we're just going to go. Okay, any other XCAPers have any comments? All right, I'll turn it over to public comment and see if we, if any members of the public would like to speak. This is item number 6, review and approve the chair's XCAP update number 5 to City Council, tentatively scheduled for May 18th, but you've now heard it's going to be some date in June. Please raise your hand digitally, or what was it, Ruchika? Press *9, I think.
*9, yes. If you're calling in using a phone line, please press *9.
Great. So if you'd like to speak on this item, now's your chance. Please raise your hand.
I do not see any raised hands at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so bringing it back to XCAP, we need to make a formal motion. Well, so here's a question. If we think we might amend this before the actual council meeting, and we're going to have a meeting on May 20th, do we move it today, subject to any additions next week, so that we've at least completed that item? Philip, I'm wondering if you've got any thoughts here.
I'm sorry, regarding moving the meeting?
Right, and so moving this report, because we're still going to have at least one more bite at the apple of the May 20th meeting to update City Council.
Yeah, it's possible. I would just suggest that keeping in line with the discussion earlier, that we've got a pretty full meeting potentially at our next meeting.
Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah, because on the agenda, it says draft of XCAP update to City Council for May 18th. So that means discussing it on May 20th would not be useful.
Well, May 18th is not when the date's going to be. He just told us it's going to be June something.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's correct. It's going to be delayed.
Okay,
yeah.
fine.
And so, so this will be correctly dated for the whatever the date of the City Council meeting is. So if you guys are okay moving my report with the corrections to the fact that we will be getting noise and vibration information, correcting the outstanding XCAP question to flag that one item that I mentioned, and changing the date to be for the whatever the date of the June council meeting is. I need someone to move that and someone to second it so we can get through this agenda item. Larry?
I will move that we approve your draft letter, make the report to the City Council at a meeting in June.
Great. Do we have a second? I need a second.
You can second it.
Okay, great. I will second it. Great. Great. So I second it. And I have nothing to add other than what Larry said and what I just said before. So if there's anybody else that wants to speak, then otherwise I can call the roll. Okay, so Gregory Braille?
Yes.
Phil Burton?
Yes.
Tony Carrasco is absent. In-Young Cho? In-Young?
Yes.
There we go. Sorry, I was looking down and couldn't see you. Megan Kahn?
Yes.
Larry Klein?
Yes.
Okay. Patricia Lau is absent. Adina Levin?
Yes.
Great. Keith Rechdahl,
Yes.
Dave Shen,
Yes.
Carrie Templeton,
Yes.
and I, Nadia Naik, vote aye. So great, that passes unanimously with however many we have now. I think it's 9.
It's 10 yeses and 2 absents.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So item number 7, we've got about half an hour left, so this is we're great. We're right on schedule. And this is our XCAP member updates and working group updates. So I wanted to give the XCAPers a chance. I know Megan's been working to try to get as much completed before she leaves for DC, which I really appreciate. So I've seen some of her drafts of what she's got. I did get something from Phil and Adina, which I think, Phil, you said you added to recently, and I'm just kind of waiting to make sure Adina and you guys agree on those edits before I look at those.
Yeah, Dean and I will discuss that offline, but yes.
Great.
I wrote something to try to be responsive to some recent concerns about the current environment. That's all.
Yeah, which is a tricky thing. Megan, I see your hand.
Thanks, Nadia. So I am working on the draft section that we approved at the last meeting. And my request is that if there's anything you feel like that outline is missing, if you've heard any feedback from the community on it, I'd really appreciate if you pass that on to me so that I can include it in that document that I will provide at next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks. Inyang and Dave, I wanted to give you guys, and I know that COVID has made for chaos for you guys. So I wanted to let you guys have a chance to update us on how it's going or not going, and what you're expecting.
And you want to go?
Yeah, so I can spend some time finishing. So
okay. And your section, remind us again, you guys are just sort of outlining
each alternatives.
The alternatives that we went through. And it can be super basic. I mean, we're just looking for sort of a very generic outline, because we're just sort of pre-writing what we can while we get to then the meatier stuff, which is the recommendations, right?
Yeah, so I think it's important that, you know, we document this because sake of having historical perspective, whether it's, you know, a viable option or not. So I'll work on it.
Awesome. Dave, do you want to add anything?
No, just with this virus thing going on and trying to keep up with online Zoom school, my time is super limited and probably will be until school's out. So I'll do what I can to help in Young, but I don't think you.
When is school out for you guys?
June 3rd, 4th, I'm gonna say. Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, though I'm surprised you think you'll have more time when school is over.
That is true, Greg. I am not sure. I can't see that far in the future.
Well, if not, I mean, you know, we can all sort of pitch in. I mean, at this point, the part we're writing is just kind of what's happened until now. And given that we have now an August 31st deadline, we do have time so that if other folks need to pitch in a little bit to be able to get some sections done, we'll work on that. I know Larry and I haven't had a chance to discuss how to best edit these pieces together, but we'll work on our plan as well, because Google Docs can get a little nutty as well. Sometimes it would be nice to meet face to face. I think it's going to be a while before we can do that again. So, okay. Anybody else? Was there anything else?
Yeah, I was just, since the next meeting is my last meeting, do we need, how do you, I mean, sort of related to that compiling of the documents, do we need to agendize like turning them in or anything, or shall I just email Nadia and
email
Larry?
me what you have, because Carrie and I and Adina are also in that group, right? So we'll be carrying that all forward for you.
Okay,
so
great.
Just give us what you have. I mean, more stuff is going to come in, honestly, while this process continues. And so that section will continue to get updated. I did want to make sure that we focus not just on the writing of the report, but are there any other, I mean, obviously folks are not necessarily having community meetings, but are you getting a lot of phone calls? You know, we now, as I acknowledged at the beginning of the meeting, have this great summary. emails that were put together by Sarah of the comments that we've received from the community for April and May. And, you know, wanted to see if there's been any other big community responses that members needed to highlight or wanted to highlight. Nope, yeah, it's kind of been quiet. I did want to see what the appetite was for this group to kind of go back to what XCAP did in the very beginning, or what CAP used to do, which is really help publicize as much as we can to our networks when the city gets their town halls ready and stuff. So whatever we can do to get that information out there would be super helpful. You know, the more people who have eyes on what we're doing, the better our work product's gonna be. So that would be super helpful. And I did want to say again to the members of the community who may have been had the most contact with Megan and with Pat Lau, that going forward, you know, certainly I'm available, but I think I speak for everybody when all XCAPers have put themselves in this position because they're willing to listen to community members. So you should feel comfortable reaching out to us. You can reach all of us at the XCAP email. And otherwise, I can certainly get you individual emails if there's someone in particular that you feel more comfortable with. So feel free to contact me and let me know. But we're here to be able to work with all of you. And you know, I don't want anyone to feel abandoned because they talked more to one person than to others. So we are here to support you.
The thing that frustrates me is that, you know, we can send emails out, but we get the same people who are fairly engaged. But if you really want to get the people who aren't engaged, going door to door is the best. And nowadays, going door to door is not very productive.
Yeah, please do not go to door. People will hate us. Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge for the city, which is how do we rise above the noise and the fray right now during this difficult time? And does anybody have suggestions? I mean, have there been things that have broken through for you while coronavirus has been going on that you're like, wow, that was effective. I paid attention to that, other than Tiger King, because we're not going to make like a Netflix documentary about our process. But what else has maybe caught people's attention?
You could give out rolls of toilet paper with all the XCAP information.
That's great.
I know people have been watching, you know, Principals Coffee, you know, the superintendent, Don Austin, has regular webinars. Ed has webinars. My wife has been watching a lot of those for many of us, since we're not schlepping around anymore. Those kinds of things are in some ways easier. And there's, you know, we all need something to do sometimes. So maybe, you know, maybe we do need a Netflix documentary. But you know, those seem to be opportunities that people previously might not have taken advantage of because you would have had to go to town hall or, you know, try to figure out how to get channel 34 on your TV. But if you can watch something on YouTube or on you know, Zoom thing or whatever, then, you know, I get the impression that maybe there's more of that going on than there used to be, and maybe we could take advantage of that. This meeting is not exactly gripping viewing, so maybe we could do something that is.
Go ahead, Ed.
I could give you a little, let's see, I'll give you a little example of that. So I posted on LinkedIn the table talks that I'm doing with the mayor every Friday. And, you know, and prior to the shelter in place, if I post something on LinkedIn, I'll get maybe 1,000, 1,500 views. This particular post has 5,100 views. And it's just a little thing. All it is a table talk ad. And it is just interesting that people are seeing things and you know, not to assume either the subject is particularly captivating or what have you, but people are seeing things in different ways. And obviously they need to be bite-sized in ways that people are willing to consume them, but it is an interesting time where you know, our methods and our where we spend our time are a whole lot different from where they were before. So maybe we'll do 2-minute videos of each of the alternatives we've talked about, you know, the virtual walkthrough and be able to get snippets, feedback off of that. And we're talking to the team as to what's doable.
Well, you might consider doing a voiceover to the existing videos. I mean, every time we've watched those videos, we've had AECOM walking us through it, but it might be good to have them have a pre-recorded script, and maybe they have to slow down the video to be able to say all of the caveats, but I think that would be a more effective way, because for a lot of people, you watch those videos and some parts, you know, utilities flash in and flash out, and that makes it seem like it's really magic. And after having participated in a utilities meeting, I appreciate that the sewer system is not magic, but a lot of very complicated, gravity sensitive pipe that is way more than you ever
It
want
has to go downhill. Yeah, but I think that that's the kind of thing that maybe some of us could help with. The script is actually probably the hard part, but either the script or the recording.
Right.
You know, either we need to get some of the high school kids to build Churchill Avenue in Minecraft, and then maybe that'll get people excited.
I nominate.
Right.
Dave, if your kids are bored, they can build something out of Legos. Go for it, or blocks, or anything. Okay, well, I did want to have the opportunity for the public to, if they've got suggestions for us, I'll open it up for public comment on this item. So Ruchika is waiting to see if anyone wants to digitally raise their hand, or if you're on the phone, you can hit *9. If you have suggestions about how we could do a better job reaching out to neighbors and get people's attention during this time on this important issue. Clearly, we've got all of you guys and we really appreciate it, but we need all your family and friends who live in the city and maybe beyond, in neighborhoods that aren't adjacent to the tracks but are still living here, to kind of get interested. And so if you've got any suggestions on how to do that, we are wide open, except we're not giving out free toilet paper. I just want to put that out there right away before someone thinks that we've got extra. I see.
Thank you. I see. I see member of the public, Susan Newman. Please feel free to unmute yourself, and you can begin talking now.
Sorry for taking up so much airspace, but maybe I'm the only one watching. I'm not sure at this point. But I really, really like the idea of doing the animations of the different alternatives and slowing it down and really talking about it, and even using it as sort of a kind of a visual focus for discussion of the sort of different concerns of different parts of the community. I think the more you can kind of lay some of that out, and the better, the more people will be interested and will start to feel engaged. I think Nadia is completely right that those really rapid presentations at the town hall meetings seem designed to stop conversation. And I think if you want people to be engaged, you've got to be ready to engage them and hear what they've got to say and what their questions are and what their worries are. And you know, I don't think it's going to be successful if it's perceived as guiding people's opinions too strongly, if that makes any sense. So make it an occasion for discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. I do have another member of the public, Eileen Fagan. Feel free to unmute yourself and begin talking now, and that would be followed by a person named Kerry. So Eileen, please, you may begin speaking now.
Hi there. Thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to second what you guys have been talking about. I do think helpful to get more of the community engaged. And visuals, I love the idea of slowed down, explaining, showing what it would really look like at each of these intersections. Now that may be work to do, but hopefully, as you said, you already have AECOM having done this, and it's just adding a voiceover to the visuals. And then, you know, having a real town hall via Zoom. The whole world has gotten used to Zoom. And, you know, having that as a way to participate, and frankly, people are at home, and why not? It's a good time to get people engaged in something, and maybe that would even start a new way of engaging with citizens in Palo Alto. And I would strongly encourage not just a 2-minute kind of format for questions or whatever, but using the chat function pretty extensively to let people ask their questions so that it moves faster, because if we all take 2 minutes, it's too long. And with that, I'll wrap up. So thank you.
Thank you. Member of the public with the screen name Carrie, please unmute yourself and you can begin to talk now. You can start talking with the screen name Carrie.
Carrie, you're unmute. Oh, you just muted yourself again. If you unmute yourself, it's your turn to speak. Carrie, we see your microphone is muted. If you could unmute yourself. There you go.
There you go.
I think that the animation, you know, for the Churchill ones, I think that those were good, but I think that if you're really going to show the Churchill with mitigations, that there should be an artist rendering of the page mill access points to Alma, where the lights would be, so that, you know, that those connect. And then also that the Kingsley, it's Kingsley, where that, so that the turn movements are shown, you know, so it's really clear that you can now connect Alma and Embarcadero, you know, so that those make sense. I think they went too fast for one thing. And I think it's an overall, and the other piece that I thought, you know, there's the plan, but it'd be nice to be able to really have a focus of Embarcadero and El Camino, what that intersection is actually going to look like, not just a picture. I mean, maybe a picture with cars on it, or just more of a easy to follow what will actually take place at Embarcadero and in El Camino, and then where it goes into Galvez, you know, how those lanes are kind of changing, you know, to carry the traffic. So I think that that would be really important to have. So when you have the Churchill with mitigations, you actually go into in depth of all the things, the parts of the mitigations. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another member of the public, Mr. David Kennedy. Feel free to unmute yourself and you can begin to talk now.
Still with you. You guys are great at perseverance. I'm impressed. You've talked about some of the challenges of public presentation. Just following up on the last speaker, I think if there was a way you could also, in addition to the various recommended alternatives, the specific alternatives, you could somehow represent what I call the ripple effects. Talked a little bit just previously about Embarcadero and El Camino, could be Embarcadero and Kingsley, depending what happens at Churchill. But also, it probably less so, but there'll be some ripple effects at Meadow and Charleston as well. And I think if you could convey that information, that'll get the public's attention, if you can get the public there too. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any other members with raised hands at this time.
Great, thank you, Ruchika. So yeah, I guess I question back for Ed. I think the idea of certainly slowing down the videos, I saw you doing a thumbs up, Ed, but also artist renderings of what those traffic intersections might look like might make it a lot easier to explain what happens there. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, because it's one thing to see them on a map, it's another thing to understand what they might look like. Understanding that this level it's so highly conceptual that the bike ped stuff is also hard draw, but whatever we could do to provide at least a little bit more of a sense of what those mitigations might look like might really be helpful for the town halls.
Great. I really appreciate the feedback. As we've talked about before, I know we're currently talking to AECOM about how to use that virtual town hall format that they had presented at the last meeting and build on the content we've already created. So, ideally, it would minimize the need to do additional new content. But, as was just described, really just slowing things down, using the ability to explain things in a little more detail than we've been able to in the more typical town hall format is a really interesting and important area for us to explore. So happy to follow up. I know Philip and Ruchika and our entire team have their own ideas about how we can do this. And so absolutely like to take a crack at it, bring it back to XCAP for your feedback.
And I did want to ask you, Ed, it's in the update to City Council that I discussed, but since PAUSD sent us their comments, we've really put a lot more meat on the bone in terms of the new alternative for the Churchill underpass. And even just in the school's comments, they didn't quite seem to understand even the two original alternatives. And so I was wondering if you, I know obviously a lot of calendar items have slipped, but not sure what was the line of communication previously. I think it was to the City School Liaison Committee. Wondering when that might be coming back on the agenda to make sure that the school district is kind of up to date on what the latest things are, and if they wanted a chance to give us more thoughts on how those have developed and clarify things that they wrote previously that they may have misunderstood, that we kind of make sure that we can have that loop.
Right. I think that, we've made a lot of progress on the alternative such that, to your point, it may be a good time just to go back to them and say, rather than just focus on a single alternative, let's look at everything that's now sort of on the table and allow them to give us some, hopefully a little deeper feedback than that memo was able to convey.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think prior to COVID, we were all also very worried about getting the business community's feedback. I feel like at this point, it would be very difficult to really ask the business community to be providing feedback when they're kind of just worried about staying open right now. So I am very sensitive to the fact that we may not be able to put the kind of focus we want on that given the situation, but it's certainly something, as we start to get into this new next phase, we should think about a little more carefully. I don't really have any suggestions. I just want to be sure that we acknowledge the business community in the conversation. So, great. XCAPers, is there anything else that we have before we move on to any staff updates? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to item number 8, which is for staff. Staff, is there anything we missed or that you wanted to tell us about, or anything that we didn't have agendized that you need to share?
This is very unofficial XCAP, but I just wanted to share that Chantel had a very beautiful baby boy.
Great, yay.
Full head of hair.
Great. I was about that.
Very nice.
Please send her our best.
Will do. Thank you.
Glad to hear that. Okay. All right. I think with that, we are adjourned and we're early. So good job, guys. Thank you all for participating. I really appreciate it. And thanks to all you attendees for hanging in there.
Thank you, Nadia.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, team.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.